Good evening, PWCS families, and welcome to tonight's Family Engagement Series. My name is Yanette Boyd, and I am the Supervisor for Family and Community Engagement. Today's session is Empowering Families and Schools, Creating Shared Responsibility for Learning. Today's presentation will be recorded and will be presented in the requested languages of English and Spanish. We will review the interpretation slide for all our families that need it. Once that is reviewed, we will begin interpretation. If you're on your computer, you're going to look for the interpretation button on your control bar. Once you click on it, pick your desired language. Then your icon should change. If you're on your phone, click on the Join Audio and click Call over Internet. Click on the three dots and more. Click on Language Interpretation and click on the language you want and done. At this time, the Spanish interpreter will review the slides.
Buenas noches y bienvenidos. Para español en su computadora, busque el globo en la parte inferior, haga clic para activar y escoja español. El icono cambia a ES, que es español, y haga clic para listo. En su teléfono, haga clic para unirse al audio a través del internet. Haga clic en los tres puntitos, haga clic en interpretación, escoja el español y haga clic para listo.
We will now begin interpretation. So at this time, I would like to introduce and welcome Mr. Victor Powell. He is the Supervisor of Title I and IV Instructional Programs here in Prince William County Schools. Welcome, Victor.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. We definitely appreciate you tuning in this afternoon. And again, based on this is from our rescheduled event earlier this year. So definitely super excited to have Dr. Mapp with us for this presentation tonight. Just to kind of go over just a little bit about Dr. Mapp. She is a professor at Harvard Graduate School Education, whose work over the past 25 years has focused on building strong partnerships among families and communities and educators to improve student achievement. She is a nationally recognized expert in family and community engagement and is a prolific author and creator of the dual capacity building framework, which we use here in Prince William, Family and School Partnerships. Thank you so much. Good evening, Dr. Karen Mapp.
Thanks, Victor, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everybody. And boy, oh boy, this winter was a bit of a doozy, and it threw us a couple of curveballs when we were trying to get together. And I think you all really ended up with some significant snow days as a result. See, us here in Boston, we know how to do snow. So, and ice. And so consequently, when it snows like that up here, we're only out of school for maybe 2 days. And that's it, because we have all sorts of equipment and plows and all that. But you folks down there, it's a different story. So I know you're glad that the temperatures are getting a little bit warmer. We are too, although I guess it's going to dip down a little bit again next week. And I saw the dreaded word on the weather forecast, snow. I hope that that's not true, because we don't want any more of that stuff. We're done. So I hope that you all don't have to deal with that, but they're warning us that we may see a few of those little white flakes coming down again sometime in the next 3 or 4 days. So we hope not. We hope not. But again, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if we can do that. So hopefully everybody can see that. And so the title of my presentation is Building the Capacity for Effective Family School Partnerships. So what I'm going to be talking to you about tonight is really what we know about why your partnerships with your children's schools are so important. And so one of the things that I always say when I start these presentations, when I'm doing them all over the world, actually, because I do a lot of professional development for family engagement, not just here in the United States, but all over the world. And I make this statement right in the beginning, which says that, our family engagement is actually a strategy and not a goal. So what do I mean by that? So a lot of times we will see family engagement listed as a part of your district's plan? Because many times I'll hear people say, well, getting to know our families and being in good relationships with our families is just good public relations. And, that's the reason why we have it as a goal. We just think it's a good idea to be able to communicate with our families and for them to communicate with us because it just seems like the right thing to do and it's good for PR. Now, I get that. That is true. It is a good public relations strategy. But what I have found is that when we see districts and their strategic plans, they may have some academic goals, which I hope they're sharing with all of you as family members. So they probably are saying that they want to make sure that they increase the academic achievement of the students and that maybe they're going to close some achievement gaps that there may be in existence and that they want to improve graduation rates. Sometimes we see things like reduce absenteeism, and sometimes we'll see things on the goal sheet like making sure all the children are reading at grade level. So these are just examples. But sometimes on that goal sheet, what I see is strengthen family engagement. Again, it's looked at as maybe a public relations goal. But here's the problem. When we say that family engagement is a goal, a lot of times what happens is that our districts and our states see it as something separate from really teaching and learning. So it becomes sort of this thing that's an add-on that maybe we can get to it, maybe we can't. And sometimes it's seen as something that's actually taking away resources from other things that school systems feel that they should be doing. And a lot of times we'll hear some of our practitioners say, well, we should really be focused on those other goals, making sure our kids are reading at grade level and making sure our kids graduate. But what I say to folks is that, you know what? When you look at family engagement as a strategy, you understand that it is an essential part of the work of schools to achieve those goals. So, our schools partnering with you as family members, we know now from the research that it actually helps us to attain the goals for our students. So it shouldn't be seen as just a PR strategy. It shouldn't be seen as just something that's nice to do. We actually understand now that it's a real important piece of what all schools should be doing in order to make sure that our children are achieving and our schools are hitting their targets. So it's not just an add-on. It's a part of the work of school, of everyday schooling. Reaching out, building partnerships with families is that important. So let me just say a little bit more about what I mean by family engagement. And when you hear that term, what does it actually mean? So some of you may have heard the term parent involvement or family involvement. Well, we're really trying to move the field to talk about not just involvement, but engagement. We do say family now because we want to make sure that that term is inclusive of all different kinds of families, all adult caretakers. Sometimes when we just say parent, people make the assumption that we're only talking about biological parents. But no, we're talking when we say family about grandma, grandpa, auntie, uncle, cousins, foster families, you name it. So that's why we've moved kind of away from saying parent to saying family. But we're also trying to move away from the concept of involvement and really expand it to talk about engagement. Larry Ferlazzo is a teacher. I hear he's retiring this year in California. And this is what he says about it to get us to start to think about this. So he says a school striving for family involvement often leads with its mouth. So it's telling families what they should be concerned about. It identifies the projects, tells families how they can contribute, not really listening to families, which is what he says that's the difference between involvement and engagement. So a school striving for engagement leads with its ears, right? It's listening to you. It's making time to listen to what your concerns are, what you think about, what you dream about, what you worry about your children. And he says, the goal of family engagement is not to serve clients, but to gain partners. So we don't look at you as a client. We look at you as a partner, meaning that we should be in two-way communication with you. We should be talking with you, not at you. So this is just a list of things that we should look for when we're trying to see whether we're doing involvement activities versus engagement activities. Now, let me say this. No shade for schools that are still in the involvement camp. No shade for states that are still in the involvement camp. Because unfortunately, we haven't done the best of jobs at teaching people how to do engagement versus involvement. So a lot of times schools are actually starting or still at the involvement phase. And that's where we see where the schools are really focusing on what we call individual responsibility, not really looking at our families as a collective. So it's sort of, I expect you to do this. I'm going to hand you this sheet that has all these things on it, whether it's what goes in the back to school backpack or the schedule of some of the events that we might have at the school. And I'm going to look to see that you show up. And when you do, I check that off. And if you don't, well, sometimes, unfortunately, families get labeled by whether or not they show up at things. And that's really not fair because you may be working 2 or 3 jobs. You may have elderly parents that you're taking care of. So we can't just judge families based on the things that they show up to at school. And I'll talk more about that later. So the relationship when it comes to involvement is very what we call transactional. So it's sort of like when you go to the store, you pick up an item, you go to the checkout counter, you check out. You don't really, unless you're a gabby person like me, you don't really have a lot of communication with the store clerk. And as we know now, some places we don't even do that. Everything's done, through the computer. So there's really no relationship there. But when we talk about engagement, we're really focusing on sort of this collective. You know how we say it takes a village to raise a child? That's more the idea when we talk about engagement. We're talking to each other. There's two-way communication between staff at the school and the families. And, our conversations are really about our students and not just about negative things, but about positive things and about ways that we can work together to help those students achieve. So that's really when we say family engagement, we're really trying to move towards this more collective where we see each other as partners, where we're making decisions together and not decisions are being made for us. So some of you, if you're old like me, you might remember this commercial, this Wendy's commercial, where these ladies were demanding, they were saying to Wendy's, or to the other probably competitors, where's the beef? If we're going to spend our hard-earned dollars on your hamburger, we want to see that it looks better than what's on that plate down there, where it's just a little hamburger patty and a piece of cheese and a pickle. We want to see more if we're going to spend our hard-earned dollars. And so we know that a lot of times families and community members and teachers and others have the same question about family engagement. Where's the beef? What if we spend our time doing this, if we spend our time in partnership with each other, why? What's going to be the impact? And so we know from almost 50 years now of research that family engagement really makes a big difference. And I recently wrote a book with some of my colleagues called Everyone Wins. And it's actually the newest version of a series that myself and one of my writing partners named Ann Henderson, we've done this now for the past 20 years. And we decided to publish a new book because it was time. And what we do is we look at the research and we ask the research to tell us, why is family engagement important? And the book that we published 20 years ago really focused on why is engagement important for our students. But this latest version, Everyone Wins, the reason why we titled Everyone Wins is because now we have found out this engagement really helps everybody. So it's not just the students getting higher grades and test scores when we partner, them having better attitude about school when we partner, but we also see that our educators are actually happier at their jobs when that school has a family engagement culture. It helps them to appreciate the multiculturalism that might be in your community. And for you as family members, when you have strong relationships with your children's teachers and staff, it actually helps you have stronger relationships with your children because teachers sometimes will share with you some tips on how to talk to your children about their academics. And so a lot of times you also have a better skill and knowledge about what your children should know and be able to do so you can be stronger advocates for them. We also know that family engagement helps with the school climate. Again, a lot of the staff like working in a school where there's strong family engagement. And also we see for the communities, we see things like reduced suspensions. So there's actually a brand new study out. It just came out last month and it's called the Engagement Advantage. And I just wanted to share with you just a little bit about this study because it's very exciting. I'm very excited about it. It is authored by two of my former students, so I'm a proud parent, and Dr. Ayel Bergman and Dr. Zenzele Riddick. And what we did was we asked two questions. This actually came about because during the pandemic, during it and right after it, I started hearing from my superintendents that I was communicating with that the schools that had strong family engagement cultures before COVID actually did better during and after COVID. They saw that they had stronger grades and test scores. They saw that they weren't suffering from the same types of really high chronic absenteeism as their schools that were also in the same district. So we decided we're going to do a study to see if that's true. Were schools that had strong family engagement actually better equipped to withstand academic disruptions or the impact of something like COVID? And then we decided to ask a second question, which was, if we find out that those schools actually did better during COVID, what exactly did they do? What are they doing at those schools that made that possible? So, good news, we found out that absolutely that schools that have strong family engagement did better during COVID. So you see that the schools that had weak family engagement had much higher rates of chronic absenteeism than the schools that had strong engagement. Now, everybody suffered during COVID and post-COVID with high rates of chronic absenteeism, and some districts are still trying to deal with that. But what we know now is that if your school has a strong family engagement culture, that has a way of making it so that chronic absenteeism isn't as much of a problem. So you could see that the schools with strong family engagement had about 800 fewer absences in the school year, which for places where attendance rates matter when it comes to budget, that actually equates to about 45,000 extra dollars in a school budget. And I know a whole lot of school principals who would love to have an extra $45,000. Sometimes that's an additional staff person at the school. We also saw that, guess what? When your school has strong family engagement, it's able to resist some of these disruptions, and the students actually did better. They didn't have the same kind of learning challenges that a lot of schools experienced during and after COVID. So you can see that the schools with weak engagement, their scores dropped more significantly than the schools with strong engagement. And same thing with math. So on the left is English language arts, so English proficiency, and on the right is math. So the students didn't have as much of a learning challenge. In some places, they call it learning loss if they had strong family engagement. So that's because the educators and the families were working together to make sure that those students didn't experience those kinds of losses. So the second question was, we wanted to know, okay, now that we know that strong family engagement makes a difference, what were those schools doing? And by the way, this study was conducted in Illinois because Illinois actually sends out a survey every single year to every single school in Illinois that tracks a number of things, but one of the things that they ask about is their family engagement. So that's why we went to Illinois to do this study. So once we found out that family engagement did make a difference, we wanted to know, okay, what are those schools doing? What exactly are they doing that make them strong in family engagement? So we partnered schools, which we call bright spot schools, that scored high on that family engagement survey, with schools that scored low. So we called them partner schools. Doesn't mean they're bad places, like I said, but we just saw a significant difference in what the bright spot schools were doing versus the partner schools. So what did we find out? And I want you all to think about this because I think that maybe you as family members have experienced this yourselves. So at the bright spot schools, what we found was that everybody in the building, but particularly the school principal, sees you as equal partners, treats you as equal partners. So when they speak to you, when they send out communications, they're constantly telling you, you are welcome here. We want you to be partners with us. And they engage in the kind of communication that makes families feel really welcome as true and equal members of the school. Some of you may have had that experience with a school where they really go the extra mile to reach out to you, to make you feel comfortable, to make you feel welcome. They don't just call you with bad news. They let you know what your children are doing. They ask you for your opinion on things. So that's what we saw at those bright spot schools. Second thing we saw is that the leadership created opportunities for their staff to reach out to families. They actually built it in some cases. I think I might have a slide later on that shows you that they actually build family engagement into the regular daily schedule so that their teachers can call you or the teachers can schedule appointments with you. So it's not something that they make teachers do on their own time. So they create an infrastructure and an expectation that family engagement is important. So when you work at that school, you know family engagement is an important part of who we are. It's in the school's DNA. So it's an expectation. If I work here, I know that family engagement is important. The third thing we saw was that they really spent time talking to families one-on-one. And I mean talking to you one-on-one, not just sending out text messages, not just sending out, things in the backpack, but making sure that there's eye contact, that we see each other. So whether it's we're going to make sure that at bus pickup and drop off, we're out there greeting families. Or maybe we're going to do home visits in the community. Or maybe we're going to go to community meetings where families can see us and we can have conversations with them. And those conversations, a lot of times, really focused on the students' progress and academics. So it wasn't just, oh, Joshua's doing really great. He's a great kid. No, Joshua, we know now that he's struggling with reading. We're going to work together on that to make sure he's reading at grade level by the end of the year. So let's talk about what we can do together. Okay, so again, they focus on seeing you, talking to you, valuing your voice, and the conversations are student directed. They come from where they see your student might be having either challenges, and let's work on that together. And then the last one is that they really spend time building relationships of trust with you. So those relationships are enduring. They get to know you. It's not just you and your student are a number. We really get to know you. We make sure we pronounce your name correctly. We make sure that we try to, get the proper translation. That's just a given. We do that just a matter of course. Okay? So those are the 4 practices that we see these bright spot schools doing. So I want you to think about, is that what you're experiencing? We really hope so. Again, we understand that some places might still be doing involvement, but what we're doing in Prince William and what I'm doing with, the folks that you see on the screen today, we're trying to make sure that we provide the kind of training that we can bring many of the schools up to be bright spots. This is what I wanted to show you. So this is something called the master schedule. So if you work at a school, this is something that you're probably familiar with. Family members maybe don't always get to see this, but this is the chart that shows every minute of the school day and what's supposed to be going on. Okay, it's called the master schedule. And as you see here at this school, the principal has actually blocked out time for his teachers to connect with families. So every day, there's a period where teachers, maybe they get another teacher to take their kiddos, or maybe their kiddos are in recess or whatever. But that time is programmed in for those teachers and other staff to be able to maybe call parents or send them text messages or schedule a meeting at school. So this principal's serious because he's saying, I'm going to build it into the schedule. And guess what? He actually has a tracker system. So the teachers have to fill in if they spoke with you, for how long, what was the topic about, so that they can collect data and make sure that all the teachers are reaching out to families. And if not, then he goes and he'll talk to the teacher about what do we need to do to help you with this. All right. So like I said, at this Bright Spot school, the principal makes sure that family engagement is a priority. So where do we start if we want our schools to grow into this? And I have an institute here at Harvard. Some of the folks on this call have attended it. And we talk about, okay, if we want to change our schools from partner schools to bright spots, or if we want to move from involvement to engagement, where do we need to start? And I have to say, we have to start with ourselves. And this is for families too, because a lot of times we may have families that are on the PTA or the PTO, whatever it's called in your district. And sometimes you might get a group of family members who know each other and they're familiar with each other, but not with the entire school community. And they might also have some beliefs about the other families that might not be true. So in a book that I wrote called Beyond the Bake Sale, again with my partner Ann Henderson, right at the beginning of the book, we talk about what are the beliefs that you have to have. How do you have to show up when you're doing family engagement. And so we talk about the four core beliefs. And so we say, you've got to believe that all families have dreams for their children. I was deputy superintendent for family engagement here in Boston from 2003 to 2005. And I worked with a lot of families. And some families were in challenging circumstances, whether it was mental health challenging circumstances, whether it was, economic challenging circumstances. It could have been drug and alcohol abuse. And when I talked to those families and really spent time with them, I always heard them say something like, Dr. Mapp, can you please make sure my child doesn't end up like me? They cared. They had dreams for their children. So, and I never met a parent that didn't. So, what I want to say to you here is that we've got to really walk into these spaces believing that all of our families have dreams for their children. We have to understand that. And they send them to school because they want their children to do better, to be better. We also have to understand that all of our families, regardless of their circumstances, they have the capacity to support their children's learning. They bring something to the table. And maybe the ways that they can be engaged are different, but that doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity to participate with us and helping to support their children. We have to be careful about how we define the word capacity, because sometimes we define it very narrowly. So people say, well, our parents only graduated from the 5th grade, or our parents don't speak English. Well, that doesn't mean that they don't have capacity to support their children's learning. They all do. Again, we talked about we've got to see our families as equal partners. And then I do tell school systems that they really have to be the ones to take that first step to reach out to families, because a lot of times, unfortunately, families may have had bad experiences with school themselves when they were in school. So it might be hard. They might be intimidated by educators. So we have to roll out the red carpet and let families know you are welcome here. Because if they don't see that red carpet and they see that door is closed, they might not be feeling all that great about busting through that door on their own. We have to open it up for them. We have to let them know that we want them there. So how do we do it? So I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this, and then I'm going to try to open it up for questions. So this is something called the Dual Capacity Building Framework. You heard Victor say that this is the foundation for a lot of the work in Prince William. And basically what it does is it tells us how to get to be a bright spot school. That's basically what it does. It's a logic model that takes us from identifying sort of what's standing in the way of good, strong family engagement. So that's the first column that says the challenge. The second column, called the essential conditions, tells us, okay, what do we need to add to our portfolio of what we do in order to move maybe from involvement to engagement, or from a partner school to a bright spot school. So it specifically tells us this is what you need to do if you want to build those partnerships with your families. The green section talks about what starts to happen once you start to do these things in the purple column. What are some of the things that you're going to see happen? And then finally, you'll see the difference between the first column and the second column. First column, the educators and the families are separate, right? But in this fourth column, they're together. So if you put the essential conditions in place, you start to see how people change, so these are some of the goals that we want to see on what capacities we want to see built. We start to work together in partnership, and those partnerships support student learning and school improvement. So we're going to go over this a little bit more specifically. So we mentioned some of the challenges, right? A lot of times our educators have not been trained on really good, strong family engagement. And because of that, they don't really see family engagement as being that big of a deal. So why do we have to do it? Nobody's ever told us before that this was really important. So we can't blame our teachers and others because they haven't been trained. And then for our families, as I mentioned, some of you may have had bad negative experiences with your schools or maybe feel shut out. So those are some of the challenges that we see between home and school that sometimes prevents partnerships from happening. So again, this purple section is talking about, okay, what are the things that you want to build into your practice? So we call them the essential conditions, and there's two pieces. So the process conditions, process, if you look it up in the dictionary, it means steps. So these are the steps that you want to put in place to make those partnerships strong between home and school. And then the organizational conditions, that's where that leadership makes sure that there's systems and structures in place, like that principal who put that structure into the school day. That's what we mean when we talk about the organizational conditions. What I want to say to you here is, because we're not going to have time to go through all of these, but the most important one on here is the first one. And that is, we've got to really be intentional about building relationships of trust between home and school. So what I want you to think about here for a moment is, what do you do when you want to build trust with another person? Just think about that for a moment. When you want to build relationships of trust with another person, what are some of the things that you do? Well, you probably make sure that you show them that you respect them, right? You probably want to make sure that they know that you're competent. So if you're, for example, a principal or a school leader, you want to let your families know, okay, I'm good at my job, and here's why, right? You can't just say it, you have to show it. But you also want to let them know that you feel like they're competent too. You're a competent parent. Regardless of what may happen, I'm going to give you that kind of respectful gaze. Okay, when I look at you, I know you're competent. Integrity, you keep your word, right? If you tell someone something, you keep your word. You don't just tell them anything and then don't follow up or don't call back. So that's showing that you want to build that respectful relationship. And then you want to do something, this is a term by Paulo Freire, personal regard, where you really see that person as a human being, not as a stereotype, not as a label, but as a human being. And you treat them with that kind of love and respect. And when I say love, I mean it. A lot of times educators don't want to use that word, but education is really a love business. We do this because we want to make sure that the children in the world are successful. That's a love business. So if we love the kids, we've got to also love the families and the communities that the children come from. So this is really important to build this kind of trust between home and school. And I mentioned to you, we want to make sure that we create these organizational conditions where we set up systems and structures. We provide money for it. I often say, if I don't see family engagement on the budget sheet at a school, I know the school's not serious about family engagement. If I don't see it on the budget sheet for the district, I know that the schools are not serious about family engagement. And if your schools are Title I schools, you should know that there is a small set aside provided by the federal government through Title I funds for family engagement at your schools. So as I mentioned, once we start putting these conditions into place, this is called the dual capacity building framework, right? So what we're going to see both in families and educators is that we're building their capacity, their capabilities, their skills and knowledge about how to do family engagement. Now we're starting to build all these wonderful social networks where we're talking to each other, we're getting to know each other. So we have a wider net of people we can communicate with. Maybe our beliefs about each other are starting to shift. We're starting to see each other as real people now. And then we're a lot more confident. So maybe as families, you're more confident to call that teacher on the phone and ask questions or go to that meeting at school and speak up. So again, once we start doing this, now we're working together in partnership. So you can see here it's like a puzzle piece. two pieces fitting together. We're working together now. So our educators really engage you as partners, co-creators, co-decision makers. And then you as families, now you're free to be engaged in lots of different ways because we realize that, again, not every family member should be expected to engage exactly the same way. It depends on your schedule, other things that are happening. But because you and the school are talking now, we all know what we can do. We've all talked about the ways we can work together. And once we do that, we've got these partnerships that really support student and school improvement. So that's the framework. I'm going to skip this because I realize sometimes with interpretation, these videos can be a little tricky. And I'm looking at the time too. So I'm going to send this. What do you all think? Do you think I should show the video or should we skip it? I want you all to tell me what you think. Yanette or Victor, what do you think?
I say let's go ahead and show it.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Let's give it a try.
At Fairfield Court, we have a high absenteeism rate. Last year, over 43% of our kids were absent. And so what the engagement team did, they came into Fairfield Court. We really talked about the average daily attendance, chronic absenteeism, what that looks like, and how powerful it is to engage and have the team go into the community. So having neighborhood walks, having home visits, but what that should really look like. So Sade really helped us with framing that message. For Sade really helped us with when you go into the homes, what is it the parents really want to hear? Well, you first got to start with that relationship and the trust, because if they don't trust you, it's really not going to matter at all. So last week it was down to 28%. And now that can fluctuate back and forth, but that's where it is right now. And that's from 43%. And again, I really think that's due to us not only having our boots on the ground, but being there in person.
You know, I think of, my own children, which they go to schools where they're not engaging and they're not. So I can see the impact, like my own children who don't have that family engagement and don't have teachers who reach out, how they see school and family as like two very different things. Like it's very different spaces, and where I really feel as though here my students see us as like all together in this. Like we are an 8th grade family together, your teachers, your parents, your families. So I know from my own experiences that it matters. My oldest son just went to another school that does a great job with family engagement, and from an academic perspective for him, his grades have improved greatly. He went from being like a C student to like A's and B's, and it has a lot to do with, me being in contact with his teachers doing the same thing, reaching out for positive, for areas he needs to improve. And so I've seen it firsthand with like my own family and my own children.
Last year, when school was over, I actually got choked up because it was the last day of school and there was a young, I want to say maybe he was in junior high because he seemed older. He's walking down the stairs as I'm going up, and he seemed so sad to leave the school. And he made a comment almost like, oh, it's the end of something, he said. But he said it to himself, but it was like so sad. And then as I came back down, there was a whole row of teachers and special education teachers. They were all lined up and they're all shaking hands with kids and saying goodbye. And it was just such a moving experience. Yeah, it was, it moves you when you see stuff like that because you don't see that in any other school. You can tell that even the students have such high regards for the school. There's a special place in their hearts.
One of the biggest gains, I would say, or one of the biggest impacts, I would say, that family engagement has had is that our scholars now have increasingly had the mindset that they can actually do this. They have started becoming self-advocates, having more self-efficacy, and that's because we've given parents the tools, we've given them the data, we've given them, resources, and the parents, in a sort of reciprocal relationship, have started saying to scholars, well, this is our expectation at home. Here are the things we're expecting. The school has told us this is what needs to happen. And so we start seeing this circular conversation where parents are absorbing the information and scholars are reacting on the fact that parents and the school are now in tune with what we want. And that literally is the success of our scholars. That in itself is going to impact not only that scholars' attendance and behavior, but also the academics, which is, what schools are about.
I love what I do. And it's hard sometimes, obviously, to be a teacher, to be an educator, to wake up in the morning on 30 and give 110. But to get to see a parent come up to me and be like, Miss Crawford or Miss Summers, because I just got married last year, so the OGs call me Miss Summers. But to come up to me and be like, you really taught so-and-so how to read. Awesome, amazing, I love that. But when other parents come up to me and say, when you had them, they were in the hallways, they were blah, 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 and by the end of the school year, they loved school. Now they're a leader in their classroom. Now they're doing this, now they're on this team and they are this different child, and I couldn't have done that without you. That is what fulfills me. That's what makes me want to continue to do this work, because I don't think I could get that anywhere else. The hugs from the kids, the hugs from the parents, it's just, it's really rewarding to really know that you're actually changing someone's life. And, a lot of my kids don't always have the opportunities that other people are afforded. And so to be able to give them those opportunities and to see the thanks and recognition that I get from parents is amazing. And I don't think I could do that doing anything else.
Okay. So you hear and see the passion of these educators. And I always get a little choked up when I see that video, even though I've seen it a couple of times now. But this is what we mean by family engagement. This is the kind of feeling, that love feeling I told you about, that we get when we're truly engaging with our families. You heard those teachers talk about, and those principals talk about the difference that it makes, the impact of this engagement on outcomes and on their ability to do their job, because their partnership with you really makes a difference. So as I said, this is sort of I'm ending where I started, which is, we don't want to see engagement as just a goal. It's a strategy. It's a strategy that helps us hit the marks for our students and for our schools. And I also want to encourage you all to use your voice, again, in partnership with your schools. Unfortunately, right now, education is a bit under attack. And we really need our families to be there with us and to show up and to say, hey, this is really important for all children, not just some children. So, if your school system says, hey, we need families to show up to make sure we get that budget approved, or to make sure that we still have libraries, or, we really encourage you to do so, because you're the ones that really drive the system. So make sure that you speak up and make sure that things aren't being taken away. And again, do it in partnership with your teachers and your school staff, because that's when it really works, when you guys are all working together to support the students. So I'm going to stop sharing, and we have about 10 minutes left. And so if it's possible, Victor and Yanette, to oversee collecting some questions maybe that some of our audience might have, I'd be more than happy to answer them if I could.
Sure. We have opened up the chat for our attendees. So if you have any questions for Dr. Mapp, please go ahead and type them in the chat, and we'll make sure that she answers those for you.
And don't be shy.
I think they are a little shy. Someone just said, thank you so much for this valuable information.
Yeah, I hope that it was helpful because again, I think that sometimes we don't talk about how important this really is. And we do know now from the research that really your schools have to have a strong family engagement focus. So, I know that's what Victor and Yannette and others are working towards in Prince William, but we've got to shift it over. So here's the thing. I've never met a parent that doesn't care about their child's education. I just haven't. But that's because I try to keep a real open mind and I might ask myself, okay, why isn't that family member coming to school or talking to me? And it's usually always because there's no trust. So you have to start with trust. You can't just have a bunch of programs and expect people to just show up. That's not going to happen because a lot of our families, as I said before, they may have had a bad experience in school themselves. So they're not really going to come to the school because they don't want to be reminded of those bad experiences. I mean, if they're sending their children to you, then they value education. Um, if their kids are never showing up, there may be some other things going on. But if you've got a student that's coming to school and maybe their parent doesn't come to any events, you can't assume they don't value education because they're sending their child to you, right? So what I always say to my practitioners is let's try to get to the bottom of why the family member isn't coming or doesn't answer those texts or doesn't answer those phone calls. And a lot of times it's because they haven't really been approached by a real human being. Sometimes all we're doing is using their technology. They haven't heard the sound of a real person's voice. And because a lot of times when we reach out to families, it's with bad news. We're calling about a discipline problem or something. They don't want to answer the phone. I don't blame them, because if you're always calling me to tell me something bad about my baby, when I see that phone call coming, I'm going to avoid it, right? So we have to start out with building relationships of trust and really being intentional about doing that. So reaching out to families right maybe at the beginning of the school year with a welcoming phone call, hello, Mr. and Mrs. So and so, and I'm Dr. Mapp, and I'm the principal of the school, and I'm calling to welcome you and your scholar to our building, and we are maybe experts on the curriculum, but you're an expert on your child, and so I'm calling today to see, is there anything you could tell me about your scholar that might help me and help our staff be really good for that child? So I'll give you an example. When I do longer presentations, I show an example of a sheet that the schools send to parents where they ask them things like, what are some of your child's favorite hobbies? What are their favorite books if this is an elementary school? And then the teachers kind of know, okay, this child likes this. And in this particular example, when mom brought the child to school the first day of school, the child was apprehensive. He was slightly on the autism spectrum. But the teacher had read the sheet and came out with the child's favorite book, which was Pete the Cat. And so sat right down there on the street with him and wooed him into the classroom. And then the parents saw this teacher listened to me. And that built that relationship right then and there between the two of them. And they talked. And so you see, it's really where we've got to show our families that we care about them before they're actually going to come to us, right? So the care has to be us. We're the ones that have to show that we care about them in order for them to then come and want to break bread with us or be with us or talk to us about their child. So I would start there because you're not really dealing with them. What you want to do is you really want to build relationships with them.
Does anybody else have any other questions?
And I'll say this, this work isn't easy if, particularly if we weren't trained. And this is where it's important for our schools to build in the time to build these kinds of relationships with our families, right? So time to make those welcoming phone calls home. So I often encourage schools to put together a little committee of some teachers and some family members and others so that we can start working on like how do we strategize? Or maybe when we have that open house, let's make it fun and something everybody wants to come to. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to play a game where we do like, what do they call that game where the bingo, where you've got to go around to different people and talk to them and find out, let me find somebody who speaks a different language, or let me find somebody who's from a different country. And you go around and you get to talk to people. Let's try to do things that are really relational, right? A lot of times open house is boring. You show up and it's, oh, here's what your child should be in the backpack, and here are the rules. And we go to the classroom, the teacher gives us a sheet, and that's not very much fun. That's not building anybody's relationship with anybody. And then we wonder why our families don't want to come back because we throw things that are boring, not any fun. Let's try to make it fun. Then they'll come back, right?
We did have another question in the chat.
So one of the things, the school that you saw, the Learning Community School, that school is in Rhode Island, and it serves a population of families, many of whom are undocumented. And what they've done is they've learned how to become what they call docu allies. They've gone to trainings on how to support undocumented family members. They have a protocol. And so they make calls, they do home visits for families who may be nervous about coming to the school. I'm gonna next week have some people come to my class who set up these kinds of systems in Minneapolis uh, during the occupation there. So, you've got to let them know that you're there for them. You've got to let them know that you have, policies in place and procedures in place. So family members know exactly what the run of show will be if, there's activity near their buildings. But there is, if you go on the web, there is information about how to be what they call a docu ally to family members who may, rightly so, feel nervous about coming to our buildings. You have to be proactive, is what I think I'm trying to say. And let them know that you're being proactive.
Any other questions?
Well, I see that we're at 7:30.
Yes.
And I know how precious people's time is, so I don't want to keep your audience here any longer. I'm sure there are people still trying to figure out dinner plans and things like that. But I really appreciate being here and spending the time, and I hope people that this was valuable to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mapp. It's always a pleasure having you. And this is something that, as Victor said, Prince William, we're really working on this and just ensuring that we're able to support our staff. So in turn, we're able to support our families. And so for everyone joining us tonight, thank you so much for joining us. I have placed the survey for tonight's session in the chat. So just take a couple minutes to fill that out for us. Let us know how we're doing and the type of programming that you want to see in the future. So thanks again to everyone for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.